Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole stack of sources, could be articles, research papers, our own notes, and we really pull out the key insights. We give you that shortcut to being, genuinely informed. Today, we are heading out, metaphorically speaking, to a place that is, well, it's like a giant history book written in stone. We're talking about the incredible ancient story you can see in the Badlands of Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota.
Yeah, our mission today is to really get our heads around how this landscape formed, how it got this way, and how it's still changing right now. We've looked at a great mix of stuff for this one. There's the official U.S. National Park Service info, of course. We also dove into some pretty interesting Reddit discussions, actual geologists talking shop, and, checked out the Wikipedia entry too. It all kind of comes together to paint this really vivid picture. Maybe the best way to start is with the man himself, Theodore Roosevelt. He had this quote about the
Oh,
Badlands.
yeah, the famous one. Right, he said. The Badlands grade all the way from those that are almost rolling in character to those that are so fantastically broken in form and so bizarre in color as to seem hardly properly to belong to this earth.
He really captured it, didn't he? That sense of otherworldliness.
He really did.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where do we even start with understanding these Badlands?
Well, first off, it's important to know that Badlands isn't just like a name they stuck on this park. It's actually a geological term.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it describes terrain that's made of soft sedimentary rocks. And because they're soft, they erode really easily. That's what creates those really rugged, dramatic shapes and often the wild colors Roosevelt mentioned.
And it's not just here.
Nope, not at all. You find Badlands formations all over the globe. Canada, New Zealand, Italy, Spain, Argentina, and even other places in the U.S. Think Petrified Forest National Park or Toadstool Geologic Park out on the national grasslands in Nebraska. Same kind of process.
Okay, so what is that process? How do you get these fantastically broken shapes?
It really boils down to two main things happening, kind of in sequence. First, you have deposition, and then you have erosion.
Deposition.
Yeah.
Like depositing layers.
Exactly. Think of it like the Earth baking a giant layer cake over, like, millions and millions of years. This whole process started way back, maybe 75 million years ago, with the oldest layer at the bottom, the pure shale. And it kept going, layer after layer, until maybe about 28 million years ago with the youngest stuff, the Sharps Formation, right on top.
Wow, okay. So what was depositing all this stuff?
All sorts of things. You had shallow inland seas covering the area at times. You had huge river systems flowing across it, carrying sand, silt, mud. Even wind played a role, blowing in fine particles. And importantly, volcanic ash from eruptions far away.
Volcanic ash way out in North Dakota.
Yeah, from eruptions in places like South Dakota, Montana, even Idaho. That ash settled and became layers of bentonite clay, which is really important later for erosion.
Okay, so deposition builds it up like a cake. Then comes erosion.
Right. And the erosion phase really kicked into high gear much more recently, geologically speaking, maybe around 500,000 years ago. Rivers, especially the Little Missouri River, which flows right through the park, started cutting down through all those layers.
And this is where the speed comes in, right? You mentioned that earlier.
Exactly. The erosion rate in the Badlands is astonishingly fast. The estimate is about 1 inch per year.
1 inch. That sounds like a lot for rock.
It is. Compare that to something like the granite in the Black Hills nearby that erodes maybe an inch every 10,000 years.
Whoa. Okay, big difference.
Huge difference. It means this landscape is incredibly dynamic.
Yeah.
And, some scientists figure that at this rate, the whole formation could actually erode away completely in maybe another 500,000 years.
500,000 years.
Yeah.
Gone. That's hard to wrap your head around.
It really puts our own timescales in perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So that rapid erosion explains the constant change. But how do we know the history? How can scientists look at these layers and say, okay, 70 million years ago, this was happening?
That's the beauty of stratigraphy, the study of rock layers. Because deposition happens sequentially, the oldest layers are always at the bottom, youngest at the top. It's like reading a book from the first page to the last.
So you can walk up a hillside and walk through time.
Pretty much. You can see the different chapters laid out. Let's start way back, over 65 million years ago, Paleocene epoch.
Okay. Dinosaurs just went extinct.
Right around then. And out west, the Rocky Mountains were actively being pushed up. Huge mountain building event. So as those mountains rose, erosion immediately started wearing them down. Rivers carried tons of sediment, sand, silt, mud eastward. and deposited a lot of it right here in what's now North Dakota.
So the Rockies are the source material for these Badlands rocks.
A big part of it, yeah. That's where the sandstone, siltstone, and mudstone layers came from. And remember that volcanic ash?
From South Dakota, Montana.
Yep. That ash settled in wetlands, got buried, and over time, it chemically altered into that bentonite clay we mentioned. And bentonite is super soft, really easily eroded by water, so it plays a huge role in how the landscape gets carved.
Ah, okay, so the different hardnesses of the rock layers matter too.
Absolutely. Sometimes you get a harder layer, like sandstone, sitting on top of softer clay. The sandstone acts like a cap, protecting the clay underneath from rain. That's how you get those cool pillar formations, sometimes called hoodoos, with a little rock balanced on top.
I think I've seen pictures of those. So these layers, they tell different stories then about what the environment was like.
Exactly. Each layer is a snapshot. Let's look at a few specific ones, borrowing a bit from the broader Badlands geology, like what you see in Badlands National Park too, as the principles are similar. Deep down, you've got the Pierre Shale. That's from like 75 to 69 million years ago.
Oh.
That tells us this whole area was under a shallow sea, the Western Interior Seaway, full of marine critters, ammonites, those big spiral shells, and even mosasaurs.
Giant swimming lizards.
The very same. Then, sitting on top of that, you sometimes find these bright yellow mounds. These are basically ancient fossilized soils, paleosols, formed when the sea retreated and the old seabed weathered. The yellow color, that's from iron minerals like goethite.
So sea, then land. What next?
Then we jump forward a bit. The Chadron Formation, maybe 37 to 34 million years ago, this points to a really different world. Think hot, wet, swampy floodplains, kind of like the Florida Everglades today.
Wow. What lived there?
Things like ancient alligators and these massive rhino-like animals called brontosaurs, huge creatures.
Okay, so hot and swampy. Did it stay that way?
Nope. Geology is all about change. The next major layer up, the Brule Formation, 34 to 30 million years ago, shows a big shift. It got cooler and drier. The swamps gave way to more open savanna-like environments.
Like African plains.
Sort of analogous, yeah. You had herds of grazing animals like oreodonts. People sometimes describe them as sheep-like or pig-like. And hunting them were predators like nimravids, which were sort of like early saber-tooths.
Saber-toothed cats. Okay, this is getting good. What's the top layer?
The youngest major one is the Sharps Formation, about 30 to 28 million years old. It shows things continuing to cool and dry out. You see sandstone river channels from that time. And a really distinct marker bed in some Badlands areas is the Rocky Ford Ash, a layer of pure volcanic ash from a massive eruption way out west in the Great Basin area.
It's just incredible. One spot on Earth holding evidence of seas, swamps, savannas. It's mind-boggling. And that's just the rocks telling the story. But you mentioned fossils earlier. That must add a whole other dimension.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting, right?
Oh, absolutely. The fossils are key to understanding the life in those ancient environments. The North Dakota Badlands are fantastic for fossils. We find bands of lignite coal, for instance.
The actual coal.
Yeah, lignite. It's a type of coal. Plus beautifully petrified trees, fossils of freshwater clams and snails, crocodiles, alligators, turtles, and even things called champsosaurs. They looked a bit like crocodiles, but were a different group of reptiles. Each one of those fossils is a clue. Put them together, and you reconstruct the ecosystem. It confirms that picture of a flat, swampy area near the coast. Lots of rivers, dense forests with trees like sequoia, bald cypress, magnolia. Trees that like wet feet.
And the lignite coal, how does that form?
That forms specifically in those swampy conditions. Leaves, branches, whole trees fall into stagnant, low-oxygen water. Instead of rotting completely, the plant matter builds up into thick layers called peat.
Like peat bogs today.
Exactly. Then, over time, as it gets buried deeper, the pressure and heat and chemical changes transform that peat into lignite. And here's a cool historical connection. Back in the 1880s, when Theodore Roosevelt was ranching out there, he and his ranch hands literally just dug lignite out of the hillsides to burn in their stoves. It was right there, exposed by erosion.
No way. That's amazing. Local fuel source.
Right. And then there's the petrified wood, which is just spectacular.
So how does wood turn to stone?
It's a process called petrifaction. The key is rapid burial. A tree falls, maybe gets buried quickly by river sediment in a flood, or maybe by a layer of that volcanic ash we talked about.
Okay, so it's protected from rotting.
Precisely. No oxygen. Then groundwater starts seeping through the buried wood. This groundwater is full of dissolved minerals, especially silica, often from that volcanic ash breaking down. Slowly, molecule by molecule. The silica replaces the original organic wood material.
Right.
It basically creates a perfect mineral cast of the wood. Often so perfect you can still see the growth rings, the cellular structure. It's incredible preservation.
Turned to stone, but still showing its history. That's fantastic. So we've gone through millions of years of building up and then carving down.
Yeah.
What about today? How are these same forces shaping the park right now?
Well, they're definitely still hard at work. Erosion is the big one, obviously. The park gets about 15 inches of rain a year on average, but it often comes in really heavy downpours.
Gully washers.
Yeah, exactly. That water rushes down slopes, carves new channels, carries away sediment. And when that water soaks into those layers rich in bentonite clay, the clay gets heavy and slippery.
Landslides.
Big ones sometimes. Whole chunks of hillsides can just slump or slide down. The landscape is constantly being reshaped by water.
Okay, so water erosion. What else? You mentioned fire earlier.
Ah, yes, the clinker. This is really cool. Locals often call it scoria, though geologically clinker is maybe more precise here.
Clinker, like from a furnace?
Sort of. Remember those lignite coal seams buried in the hills?
The stuff Roosevelt burned?
That's the stuff. Well, sometimes lightning strikes or prairie fires can actually ignite those underground coal seams.
Underground fires.
Yes, and they can smolder for years, even decades. The heat is intense. It literally bakes the rock layers directly above the burning coal, like firing pottery in a kiln.
So it hardens the rock.
Exactly. It turns the sandstone and mudstone into this hard, reddish, brick-like material. The red color comes from iron minerals oxidizing in the heat.
And harder rock resists erosion better.
Bingo! So, as the softer surrounding rock erodes away, these baked, hardened clinker layers get left behind. That's why you see so many hills and buttes capped with this bright red rock. The clinker acts like a protective cap rock. You also find another hard rock called porcelainite doing the same thing sometimes.
That explains the red tops. Okay, so all these processized deposition, erosion by water, fire baking, they create the specific features we see, like buttes.
Definitely. Buttes are classic Badlands features, those steep-sided, flat-topped hills. And they often show interesting differences depending on which way they face.
How so?
The south-facing slopes get more direct sun, so they tend to be drier, rockier, steeper. But the north-facing slopes are shadier, hold more moisture. You'll often see things like juniper trees growing there. The fruits help hold the soil, so those slopes might be less steep, greener.
Huh. Never thought about the sun angle making such a difference on a single hill.
It really does. And again, that hard cap rock, whether it's sandstone or maybe limestone in some areas, or that red clinker is key to the butte holding its shape. It protects the softer stuff underneath.
Makes sense. What other landforms are typical?
Well, you have the floodplains along the Little Missouri River, broad, flat areas built up by sediments deposited when the river floods. Very fertile, lots of vegetation. Then higher up, you might find plateaus larger, relatively flat, elevated areas, often windy up there, so plants need deep roots.
Right.
And it's easy to focus on the dramatic badlands, canyons, and buttes, but it's important to remember that a huge part of Theodore Roosevelt National Park is actually prairie.
Grasslands.
Yeah, vast grasslands. That's a crucial ecosystem supporting bison, prairie dogs, birds, all sorts of life. The Badlands are kind of embedded within this larger prairie landscape.
And specific name features, like Painted Canyon.
Right. Painted Canyon is a well-known spot, part of the park in Billings County. It's famous, as the name suggests, for its really vibrant rock colors. Just a beautiful example of all these geological layers exposed.
What an incredible story. From ancient seas to underground fires still burning today.
Yeah.
It really is a living history book.
It absolutely is. Millions of years of geological drama constantly unfolding. Deposition, erosion, fire, ice shaping the past, and water, wind, and fire still shaping it right now.
So the big takeaway here.
I think it's about appreciating the time scale, the forces involved, and understanding that these landscapes aren't static. They preserve this incredible record. And that record is valuable, for scientists studying climate change, evolution, geology, and just for all of us to see and learn from, which is why that park rule is so critical.
Don't take the rocks.
Don't take anything. No rocks, no fossils, no petrified wood. Every single piece is a clue, part of the story. It needs to stay there for everyone to appreciate, and for ongoing scientific study. It's about preservation.
Absolutely, a vital point. Okay, so let's leave our listeners with something to think about.
Sounds good.
Knowing these badlands are eroding so quickly that inch a year, but that they might still be around for another 500,000 years. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What new shapes will emerge as the land wears away? what currently hidden stories, what fossils, what layers might be revealed in the future.
And how will our own understanding keep evolving as we learn more from places like this, long after our own brief time here is done?
Deep thoughts for a deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone.